One of the things I talk about in the book in that way is that the social and psychological impact of early Parkinson's affects relationships, affects marriage. When your partner stops being able to smile, when their face stops being expressive, when they don't really respond with the kind of empathy and connection that you've been used to, then you start thinking, what's wrong in my marriage? What's wrong with me? And I've heard of cases where people end up splitting up with their partners because he's so different or she's so different. They stopped loving me. They stopped taking care of me. Then, 10 years down the road, it becomes clear that was an early sign of Parkinson's.
Hey everyone, and welcome. I am Morgan Gist McDonald, founder CEO of Paper Raven Books, and I have with us today a super special guest who is launching her brand new book called Love, Dignity, and Parkinson's: From Care Partner to Caregiver. Dr. Terry Pease, thank you for being here.
I'm so glad to be here.
I am so excited to have you here because you come to this with a sort of special set of both experiences and skills. You have a research doctorate, you've worked in healthcare and social care for a long time, and then you also have had personal experiences with your own husband having had Parkinson's. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what's in this book? Who did you write this book for?
Well, I wrote this book for me. I wrote it for the me I was when I began taking care of my husband, Peter. He had Parkinson's when I met him. And I thought, this is, I can do this. I didn't have any idea of the cognitive and the emotional and psychological effects of Parkinson's and how much I'd be called on to do. I just didn't know. And so I wrote this book for me as I was at the beginning of my time as a Parkinson's caregiver. And so I wrote it for all of the people taking care of somebody with Parkinson's, whether they've just gotten the diagnosis or whether they've been taking care of somebody for a long time, because there's just not a lot out there to explain what is Parkinson's like for the caregiver. What are you called on to be? What are you called on to surrender, to relinquish in your vision of yourself as a partner? And what are you called on to do? And so that's why I wrote it.
And Parkinson's, I mean, I didn't realize this until we started working with you on this book, Terry. Parkinson's is a tremendous disease that is becoming more and more common. What's happening with the diagnoses of Parkinson's right now?
Well, in the United States, about 60,000 people a year get a new diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And it is the second most common neurodegenerative disease. There are about 1 million people in the United States living with Parkinson's disease, and more than half of them have a committed partner. So there are lots of committed partners to people with Parkinson's. And why it's becoming more prevalent, are we diagnosing it better? Is there more of it? I don't have the answers to that. I don't know that anyone does.
And how does Parkinson's come on? You and I were talking before we hit record here that, yes, you might hit Parkinson's when you're in your 60s, but it can actually hit earlier too. Do we even know how Parkinson's kind of comes to be?
Well, we don't know what causes Parkinson's. We can tell you what has happened in the brain, that the area of the brain that produces a brain chemical called dopamine stops doing its job. And so a variety of things happen in the brain, and dopamine is no longer able to do its job. Now, what causes that problem in the brain can be a lot of different things. There can be genetic component. There can be toxins. Agent Orange is almost assumed to be exposure long ago to Agent Orange in the military or other ways has been shown to be linked to a much later diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. So it could be toxins, it could be any number of things. So a lot of different stuff can change this part of the brain. And then the changes in the brain can show up in a variety of ways. What's common is that long before the person gets the slouch and the shuffle and the sticky feet or the difficulties in moving and the tremor, there are other more subtle signs of Parkinson's most of us don't recognize. So it can have been in the person's life for 6, 8, 10 years before something happens where they end up in front of a doctor who says, this is Parkinson's. One of the things I talk about in the book in that way is that the social and psychological impact of early Parkinson's affects relationships, affects marriage. When your partner stops being able to smile, when their face stops being expressive, when they don't really respond with the kind of empathy and connection that you've been used to, then you start thinking, what's wrong in my marriage? What's wrong with me? And I've heard of cases where people end up splitting up with their partners because he's so different or she's so different. They stopped loving me. They stopped taking care of me. Then, 10 years down the road, it becomes clear that was an early sign of Parkinson's. So there are reasons for people to understand, even if you haven't seen Parkinson's in your life right now, just to understand it. I think I also wrote this book for doctors because primary care doctors and general neurologists and even movement disorder specialists don't seem to have a focus on how this affects couples. And they're really good. I mean, movement disorders doctors are amazing in terms of how they help to manage the disease, and they know about the medications and about how to just make all of those pieces work together as well as the science helps us know. But I say in the book, only one medical person in the whole time that I was taking care of Peter looked directly at me and said, "You're doing a good job." I mean, I'll even tear up about it now because that was so important to be seen. And caregivers of people with Parkinson's disease are often not seen, not recognized for the role that they play in their partner's well-being.
So what is it about Parkinson's for caregivers? And you mentioned to me earlier that this is really a book not just for the person who has Parkinson's. In fact, it's kind of not at all for the person who has Parkinson's. It really is for the person who is doing the caregiving. Why did you take that sort of angle with this book?
Well, because as I say in the book, and as is really true, there's so much good literature out there. There's great websites, there's great information out there about how to manage as a person with Parkinson's. And I didn't see the point in reinventing the wheel and trying to talk about that. But this book is written without pulling a lot of punches, kind of no holds barred, saying, this is the reality. This is what you want to adjust to. This is how you can adjust to it. Here's how you can start to reach for the help that you need before it's critical, before it's urgent. I think it would be really tough to be a person with Parkinson's and to read my book because it sort of tells the whole story of a 5, 10, 20-year course of Parkinson's in the course of 100 and some pages. So the book is for the caregiver. The book is for the person who needs to understand what's coming, how can I adjust? And my goal is to help caregivers continue to have a calm, connected, and committed marriage, committed partnership, despite the changes of Parkinson's, despite the fact that your partner may not remember to be warm or kind or connected to you. You still can have a good marriage. In fact, the way this book began is kind of funny, and I just found this piece of paper. More than 4 years ago, before my husband died, I was at a wellness retreat where I was taking care of myself. And the question came to my mind, can you have, or how can you have a good, healthy marriage despite the changes of Parkinson's and Parkinson's dementia? And so I wrote this book to answer that question because I did have that kind of marriage. And I feel like I learned something and I wanted to share it with other people because it's so clear to me when I meet people whose partners have Parkinson's, how hard they're working and how committed they are and how worn down they can be because of the invisibility and because of the social and interpersonal, intermarital changes that happen as a result of Parkinson's disease. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this.
Terry, can you give us an example maybe of something that you went through with Peter and you wish someone had told you and has made it into the pages of the book that you're eager to be able to pass on to someone else to help, hopefully save them some kind of pain or suffering?
What I can tell you is that because I had worked in various settings with people who had cognitive disabilities, learning disorders earlier in my professional life, I kind of understood how to be connected, but also not to be personally harmed or not to be personally injured by the symptoms and the behavior that comes out of the condition that the person has. And there was one series of situations that happened where basically Peter just was angry and frustrated and scared. And it would have been very easy to get into a good old marital row about that. Or you're saying, and it would be really awful because it would just deteriorate. But because I understood that this was his Parkinson's, making him so frustrated and angry and having so little awareness of what he was doing and its impact on me, I could step back and I could say, you're scaring me. And I can't take good care of you if I'm scared of you. So I'm going to go downstairs for a couple of minutes and I'll come back. And then we'll try again. And I may not have been gone more than a minute, but what it did is it created a break in that row, in that sort of agitation. And I didn't feed the agitation. And I knew it wasn't about me. And so I didn't feel like I had to just go along with the anger because it was the Parkinson's. I still had a way to contain the chaos that could have been coming and to reestablish a connection between myself and my husband who was being stolen by Parkinson's. I use an expression in various places called reaching in past the dementia. And what I mean by that is finding whatever is left of the person with Parkinson's and making that connection and letting all of that other stuff, symptoms and anger and confusion, be there, but not be where you're trying to engage. And I mean, I try to coach people on this and I talk to people about this. And as I said, I'm super passionate about giving people these skills so that you can still feel the love that you started with or the love that you hoped for, and that you don't have to just engage with the symptoms. In fact, I encourage people not to engage with the symptoms, engage with the person behind the symptoms. If you can do that, you're on your way to staying connected with your partner. And I hope my book helps people understand that this is important and it's possible.
What was yours and Peter's relationship like? I mean, what could we hope if you're able to engage with the person? You're sort of telling us that you can still have a committed partnership. I mean, what was marriage like with Peter, if you don't mind me asking a little bit?
It's personal, but I've already put myself out there. I had to learn to expect very little emotional back from him. And that's hard, but it was real. It had happened. There was nothing I could do to make it not happen. So that if I made something for him to eat, and he used to sit, it's right over there outside on our front porch, and he would sit on the front porch and enjoy the weather, because in Maine, it doesn't stay nice for long, but when it's nice, we soak up every minute. For example, if I would bring him a lunch, I'd bring something out for him that I knew he or hoped he would enjoy, and I would give it to him. And he was a man with really beautiful manners. And yet he would never at that point say thank you. He would just kind of take it and sort of processing lunch, food, eat, maybe hungry. And that's about all that his brain could do at that point. And so I would just sit with him and I wouldn't talk and I wouldn't ask for any conversation because he couldn't do all of the cognitive pieces involved in eating and have a conversation with me. I would just be with him. I had found a way to be okay with that. And it required me to just be very settled in myself and to sort of just love him, because I just did. I really just did. And there was another time I remember that I was telling him about, I don't know, I had some kind of a ache or pain or illness or something. And I was telling him about it. And he looked at me and he said, and he was puzzled. He said, I know I should care, but I don't. Now that's heavy. When your husband says that to you, you're going to. But what I understood was that he was speaking out of his own recognition in that little moment, that the normal feeling, my wife is hurting and I like this lady and I love her. And it just wasn't there. And he was aware in that moment that it wasn't there. People with Parkinson's are often not aware of what's missing or what's gone wrong. But in that moment, he was aware. And I was able to say to him, because I guess I had my very grown-up pants on at that moment, I was able to say to him, I know you care, sweetie. And just his saying that was as close as I was going to get to warmth or connection from him. And I found a way for that to be enough. And, I'm making myself sound like I'm some kind of saint, and I'm not a saint at all. But what I did know was that there was a way to reach in past the dementia to the husband, to the man that I knew and loved, and to just be. I almost have to use my hands to point to it because there's all this stuff going on, confusion and dementia and bathroom problems and sleep problems and all of that. But somewhere there he is. And when you can find those moments, you can be fed by them. So I don't know. I mean, that's just what worked for me. And I wanted to put that in my book because I know how much Parkinson's caregivers struggle with losing the person who's been in your life for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And then suddenly they're gone. And this stranger is in your house who isn't very nice to you, can't do very much, and needs so much help. And in some ways, the more help they need, the cooler, less warm, more disconnected they become. And if you're not, as a caregiver, willing to change your understanding of what this partnership is, and you're trying to be the same relationship you were when your partner was well, you're going to suffer. You're going to really suffer a lot. But it doesn't have to be like that.
So folks, if you're here and you're like, Terry is speaking my language, how does she know that this is exactly what I'm going through? The good news is that you can get a copy of this book for free today. The book is launching. We want to get the book into as many people's hands as possible. So please go to paperhavenbooks.com/love, dignity, and Parkinson's. All one word. There is a link next to this video. You can click that link, take you straight over to Amazon. You can grab a copy of the ebook for free. You can order a physical copy of the book if you prefer. All the details are over there for you. paperhavenbooks.com/love, dignity, and Parkinson's. All one word. And Terry, it sounds like there's a piece here that's, I mean, I feel like self-care is a little bit overused, but there is a piece here of you are centered in yourself and you have come to almost a new understanding, not just of your husband and not just of your relationship, but of yourself too. How did you feel like you changed in this process of learning to care well for Peter?
Well, as he stepped away, as Parkinson's pulled him away, he didn't step away. As Parkinson's pulled him out of our partnership, I had to see myself as being without that connection and then do something about that. I couldn't just let myself sit there and be lonely. I couldn't just sit there alone and feeling isolated and unconnected. Instead, what I had to do was to ask, how can I warm myself? How can I feed myself emotionally? And one of the things I talk about in the book is something that I call a date with yourself, a date with you. And what that is just take yourself someplace special. And it doesn't have to be fancy and it doesn't have to be expensive, but it does have to be yours. And when you can do that for yourself and make that a routine part of your practice, a routine part of how you live your life as a Parkinson's caregiver, you will be stronger and more able to connect with your partner at other times. And so on my website too, I have some suggestions and places where people can tell me about the kinds of dates with themselves that they've done, because, people are so creative. Like one thing that I discovered was that in the public library in some towns, they have not only book events, but like craft events, or they have like movies. And these are things that are usually inexpensive. And public libraries are such a wonderful asset in our lives. In the US, we have them everywhere. And let that be something that you can do just for you. Now, there's an important trick that goes with this, which is that you can't wait to start reaching out for help. Because if you wait until you're worn out and exhausted and it's a crisis, you don't give yourself and your partner the opportunity to get used to other caregivers, you don't give yourself and your partner the opportunity to understand that you may prefer to have me here, but I can't be here all the time, love. And so and so is someone I trust, and they'll take good care of you, and I will be back. And so you can do that in a way, knowing that you're creating the resource that protects his caregiver.
Well, I was gonna say that's such a good point about like not waiting until you're in a crisis to even do something as simple as go on a self date, because as soon as you start this rhythm of spending time just alone for you, that gives you the opportunity to introduce, or with someone else, that gives you the opportunity to introduce another caregiver. And the earlier that you can start to do that, it sounds like the smoother things are going to go, because you're going to increasingly need more help, is what it sounds like.
Right. And something that I saw just in the paper the other day was a quote that said, "Nobody had the solution, but lots of people helped." And that really hit me, because that's so much what I say and feel about this process, is that nobody can make the Parkinson's go away. And unless you're rich as Croesus, nobody can send somebody in to do all of the caregiving. And even if somebody is there to do all the caregiving, you're still there to do the loving. But if you recognize that you don't have to be the only one, then you're not waiting for the moment when it's urgent. And I saw someone posting on a Facebook group just the other day saying, "I've always been the only one taking care of my partner with Parkinson's, and now I have to go out of town for a week." I don't know what the occasion was, but they had to go out of town in 3 days. And they had no idea where to start finding anyone, because they felt the myth is if you're a good enough, loving enough partner, you can do it all. Well, I just think it ain't so. And I think that you're entitled to get help. Nobody can solve it for you, but you can get help. And you have to learn to recognize help the way it actually presents itself, as opposed to the idea in your head. And recognize that the person who says, "How can I help?" you can say, the next time you go to the grocery store, "Pick up a carton of milk for me." And there's your start. Simple, small, something the person will do. And so, again, this is part of my mission, I think, is just to make life more comfortable and calmer and less lonely for caregivers.
Yes, so good. And you're so right that often people will say, "How can I help?" And they are saying that maybe out of genuine desire to help, but they don't even know what you might need. So they don't even know what to offer really, other than a generic, "How can I help?" And it's probably a good idea for us, as caregivers. I mean, saying a general us, I guess I caregive small children right now, different set of caregiving, but to be able to have like in your mind, like a couple of things that someone could fairly easily do for you. Could you mail this package for me? Could you pick something up at the store for me? Could you drop off dry cleaning for me? And maybe even pick it up the next week.
And you start to create kind of a bridge to your community of helpers that way. I think people are shy about offering help because they don't want to insult you, because they don't want to overreach, and because they don't want to get drawn into something that they may feel overwhelmed by. So you have to kind of weave together this safety net. That's such a tortured metaphor, but you do. You have to weave together a safety net out of all of these little strands of help. And when you can do that, then you are making it easier for yourself, that you don't have to be the only one. You don't have to do it all.
Well, if you're struggling with, "But how, Terry, how do I not do it all?" Good news is Terry wrote a book. Go to paperravenbooks.com/love, dignity, and Parkinson's, all one word. Check out all the details there. And Terry, what was it like to write this book? So I know that you've done lots of writing as a researcher, you have your doctorate, you've done lots of academic sort of writing and that sort of thing, but this was personal. What was it like to write something that was both personal and practical and helpful?
Well, I fortunately saw something online, write your book in 30 days. And I thought, oh, I can do that. It took me a lot longer than 30 days, but in 30 days, I wrote the first draft of this book, and the bones of that draft are in this book for sure. I wrote this book following that 30-day blueprint from this person online. And then I had draft number one. And then I could read it and say, oh, wait. And I still say, oh, wait, there's more to say. But that's how I began. And just building a writing practice of getting to my desk every day and writing, and not being afraid to rewrite, which is scary, but not being afraid to rewrite, and being willing to keep the long-term vision in line. Part of what I learned about writing a book is that you never sit down to write a book. You sit down to write the little section on incontinence supplies, or the little section on finding an elder care attorney. And that's what you write. And out of that comes a book. And I have to say also that the folks at Paper Raven have been just wonderful in going from, this is the draft I've got, to, oh my God, I have a book. So you guys were great. And I really appreciated all of that too, because it really made it, when I didn't know what to do next, somebody at Paper Raven knew. So that was great.
You didn't try to do the book yourself, Terry. You brought in help.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I looked for the help, and let's play that metaphor until it beat it to death. Yes. So I reached out for the help that I needed. And I learned that this product is not just from my head directly into the hands of my readers. It goes through a lot to get there. And I think I should also say that what I learned, I didn't make it up myself. I learned it from seeing great caregivers, from talking to people, from learning what people needed, and from really my own felt sense that what I have gained belongs not just to me. What I've gained belongs to other people. And what I want to do is to pass it on to other people. And I hope that's what I've done. I hope I've created something that really makes it possible for other caregivers to wade into this complicated process, more knowledgeable, more ready to ask for help, and more forgiving of themselves. There's one other point I want to make, Morgan, and you can call time on me anytime. But I saw an article recently about the myth of maternal instinct, that it's really a myth that was invented, and that mostly the ability to do care, whether it's care for little children or care for our elders or care for ourselves too, for that matter, is somewhere in all of us. And the myth of the caregiving instinct often gets dumped on wives and daughters, and everybody else kind of scatters. And the myth that you can just do it all, never complain, never have any feelings about it, and that everybody else can just kind of stand on the sidelines and say, take care of yourself. But they say take care of yourself without telling you how, and without figuring out on their own what they can offer. So you really have to be like the coach or the quarterback, something, and know what positions need to be filled and go recruit for them.
I mean, that's so true. And you give us, I mean, not only firsthand knowledge, but as you said, you are a researcher. So you've gone and you've pulled these different examples into your own life, but you've also done the hard work for us of saying, okay, here's some helpful advice. If you don't know where to start, here's where you can start.
And I think it's important to say that this is not a research book. There are some amazing ones out there, but this is really information, insight, and experiences of my own that have come together in this. I might be sitting with you over a cup of tea and say, let me tell you stuff that I think you ought to know that would help you know more about taking care of your partner with Parkinson's. So that's what this is.
So you've been through this whole process, Terry, of not only your years with Peter and everything that you learned about yourself and Parkinson's and Peter and your relationship, and then you've taken it and put it inside of a book, and you're publishing the book now. So yes, you've gone through so much change as a person. Is there anything that you wish you could go back to a younger version of yourself and offer some encouragement or words of wisdom or some lesson that you learned that maybe you wish your younger self knew?
You mean besides write faster? There's that. What would I say to my younger self? I think I would say, sort of like in the words of Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers. And don't be afraid to say, I need this help. And to know that you are not obligated to do it all. I had to have somebody smart kind of say to me, and fortunately, she said to me this early on, you don't have to do that. And you need somebody in your life who can help you with that. And if there's no one else in your life to do it, I hope I can be that person to say to you, you don't have to do it all. And look for the helpers.
All right, folks, if you're here and you're watching this, we're probably talking to you. We're probably saying something that is helpful for you. And the good news is you can read Dr. Pease's whole book on this. So go to paperravenbooks.com/love, dignity, and Parkinson's. It's linked next to this video. Click that link, takes you over to Amazon. You can get the ebook version for free. You can order a physical version. If you know someone or love someone or know and love someone who is a caregiver for someone who has Parkinson's, please consider sending this information to them, sharing it with them so that they can also get a copy. That would be a wonderful way to offer real support to them. So we would encourage you to share this with anyone who you know in your world. Thank you, Terry, so much for writing this book. Thank you for being here with us today to talk about this book. Any last words for your readers?
Oh, I don't know. I want caregivers to know that you're not alone. You might feel alone, but there's a whole world of people doing what you are doing. And it's really honorable. And I don't mean to be overly sanctimonious, but it's honorable work. It's doing God's work. It's doing the work of human love. And it's really, really valuable.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone, go grab a copy. Love, Dignity, and Parkinson's by Dr. Terry Pease. Link next to the video, and we will see you guys next time. All right. Bye, everybody.